Hello everyone and welcome. I am Dr. Floyd Richmond, and today I'll be talking you through a fugue and how a fugue is composed. A fugue is often called a monothematic work, in other words, a work with just a single melody or a single theme. I'd like to just play a little bit of this particular fugue's theme for you so you can hear what this theme is going to sound like. And that is the theme of the fugue. In a fugue, we call the theme or the melody a subject. The subject is occurring again and again throughout the song. And anytime the theme or the subject is not being played, we say that we are having something entirely different called an episode. So let me just go ahead and show you this here, beginning about at this point right here. We have an episode that comes in, and this is very short. It's really a little bit too short to be called an episode. That's why I had not initially labeled it, but I will go ahead and put a label on it since it is a part of the transitional type of material that is not a part of the main melody, the subject. This is known as Bach's Little Fugue in G minor. It's one of his more famous works, but it is very characteristic of many of his fugues. It's originally written for organ. You can hear E. Power Big and many other prominent organists play this fugue. It is one that is well known, and every organist in training will have played this fugue at some point in time. So it begins with the subject, and all fugues do, and then a second occurrence of the subject comes in a second voice, while the first voice continues with a very interesting, I'm going to call it counter melody. And it's a little bit uncommon to have these transitional episodes between statements of the subject during the first part of the fugue, but this is what Bach has elected to do here. And after his first voice sings the subject and has a little transitional episode, the second voice plays or sings the subject, and then there's a transitional episode. The third voice plays or sings the subject while the other two play counter melodies. And then finally, the fourth voice sings or plays the melody. By the way, in this particular fugue, you will generally see that voice 1 is in black, voice 2 is in red, voice 3 is in green, and voice 4 is in blue. So after you have had voice 4, this is a 4-voice fugue. You could have a 3-voice fugue or even a 5 or 6-voice fugue, but 3 or 4-voice fugues are very common. After you have heard all of the voices state the subject, we say that the exposition has ended. I'm going to go ahead and put a double bar in right here, and that's going to indicate the beginning of what we would call the development section of the fugue. Let me just point out a couple of interesting features about this particular fugue. The very first statement of the subject is in the key of G minor. The second statement of the subject is in the key of the dominant, the key of D minor. The third statement of the subject is back in G minor again. Whoops. And then the fourth statement of the subject, in the low voice here, is in D minor again. This is a little bit unusual. Bach usually, and most other people writing fugues, composes all of the subjects in the exposition in the same key, but here he's been alternating back and forth between the tonic and the dominant. Once we get to the double bar here, this is called the development section of the fugue. It begins with an episode. The episode is a transitional material. The main thing that is characteristic of an episode, you really can't predict what's going to happen in here, is it will be transitional in nature, and it will contain no instances of any part of the subject. This melody right here is quite interesting. We've got our third voice coming in with the subject again here, da dee dee dee, but here there's like a 2-beat discontinuation, and the subject reappears in another voice up here on beat 3. So we have kind of an extended subject here. That's most unusual, highly rare. I don't think that you will find too many subjects that are not absolute literal statements of the subject in almost any fugue. The one thing that Bach does in the little fugue in G minor is he visits more key centers than he does in most fugues. This subject, for example, is in G minor. This is a continuation of the same subject in G minor. This episode is transitional in nature. This subject in the alto voice is in B flat major. Oh, by the way, this particular edition is not absolutely perfect. Here the tenor voice takes the subject for a little while and completes the rest of that subject. So that's in B flat major, the relative major. That should sound quite interesting when we get to it. We get to another episode. We get to another statement of the subject. This one is also in B flat major. Get to another episode, and this episode is a little bit longer, and in fact that's going to happen throughout. This subject begins in the soprano part, and it is in C minor, the subdominant key, which is very interesting. This episode is by far the longest episode, the longest section of the piece, in which there is no statement of the subject. And then finally, before the end of the piece, the low voice comes in and sings the subject again. You usually have a very nice, good, low, full, everybody singing, everybody playing all out to the end, to end a fugue. This fugue is overwhelmingly in G minor, as is the last subject, but the last chord is changed to a G major, what we would call a Picardy third, and that's a wonderful device used to give you a sense of completion in any minor song. All right, let's go ahead and hear the fugue, and I'll just call out the key centers, and you'll be able to see when it changes from subject to episode. Here we go. G minor. No instance of the subject. D minor. Little transitional episode. G minor. D minor in the low voice. End of the exposition into the development with an episode. G minor subject. Extension right there. Now the soprano has the melody. Episode. B flat major. Might have been a few notes in there that needed to be changed. Episode. B flat major. Of course, we're in kind of a longer episode now. There might be a few wrong notes in this version. C minor. The very longest episode, very transitional, kind of descending now, but changing direction now, ascending, chromatic, changing again, and here's our final low subject in G minor. right, fantastic. Now, I think that we should, by all means, attempt to write a fugue right here, right now, on the spot. Let's see how quickly we can do this. I'm going to go to the File menu. I'm going to tell it like a document with the Setup Wizard, and I'm going to find a piano. Well, actually, it looks like I don't see anything that's got a piano in it, so I'll just go ahead and choose that one. And up here, since I only want the piano, I'm going to select each of those and remove them so that I now only have a piano in there. Don't need to change the SATB template. I'll call this a fugue on the fly. Composer. And let's continue here. And sure, let's do this in C major. Why not? And we'll just go ahead and keep everything else as is and compose within that time frame. Okay, so now I need a short and memorable theme to use as my subject. So, be da da, be. Let's do that again. Be da da, ba, ba ba da, be ba. Pa, beep, pa. Alright, sure. That's going to be my subject there. So we'll make this a three-voice, well, we'll make it a three-voice fugue, and let's see how we can do that now. So I've got my subject here, and now let's go ahead and have the bass voice do the same exact melody, and then let's have the treble voice do this. Oops, not what I was looking for. Have the treble voice and do this up an octave. Now, the other thing that I need to have is I need to have my, I'm going to go ahead and put this into voice 2. Contents of 1 into layer 2, move it, yep, good. Alright, very good. Okay, so now what we'll do is we need a counter melody to be playing while this is happening, and I'm just going to just create the simplest counter melody that you can imagine here. I'm going to have that on a G, E. Let's see, that's an E, so maybe going back to the G would work. And this time maybe we could do it with some moving notes. So I've almost got my counter melody done for the very first melody here. That's a G, so I'll go back to an E there. Well, that will sound interesting, the F against the E. And C, G, A, that's an A, so I'll put an F against that. And then we don't have to make the counter melody as interesting as the melody. And we wouldn't always make that parallel, but we will in this particular case. Okay, so now we've got our counter melody written here. Let's take our counter melody here and drop it in here. This would not necessarily be the way that Bach would have composed this. He would have composed this perhaps with two different counter melodies. However, since we do need another counter melody to be happening in this particular piece, I'm going to switch over to layer 2 here. I'm going to copy, well, let's see, I'm going to copy this here, drop it in over here, transpose it up an octave, this is my counter melody, and change it to layer 2. Let's see here, move copy layers is what I'm looking for. I'm positive it's in this menu or this menu, so let me find it. Of course, right there. Alright, copy contents of 1 into 2. I'm going to come up here and say show active layer only, so I can copy and paste this in as a counter melody against that. I'm going to turn off show active layer only. And so now, let me just go ahead and label some of these things. This is a technique text would be about the best, I think. Yep, very good. So I'll duplicate that one, I'll edit it. I'll call this subject. This is just purely for labels. Tell it OK. I'll duplicate that. I'll edit this. I'll call it episode. There we go. And I'll choose the subject and assign it. So here is the subject. Okay. And this also is the subject. By the way, so far we've got no episodes whatsoever, right? And then here also we have the subject. And this time it will be in the upper voice. Yep. And now I have finished composing the exposition of my fugue. This is not a glorious fugue, this is just quick and dirty for the sake of illustration. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, there are a few things in the harmony that I do not like, so I probably would take the time to go ahead and correct this particular counter melody, especially in this portion right here. There are some dissonances that would be a little bit uncharacteristic. Okay, so if we were to continue to compose this, the next thing that we would need would be in this area, and it would be an episode. So all I would have to do is just compose something that has nothing whatsoever to do with the subject. So let me just go ahead and do maybe a little running note, C B A B A G F G F E D C C B C, and that would be unusual in a Baroque fugue to actually have something like that, but not unheard of. I'm going to go to voice 2, and I'm going to create a nice little harmony with this. And so here we'll just go ahead and drop this in, D, C, D, C, B, A. Alright, not too bad at all. And now, almost done here. I'm going to go ahead and go back and compose my third voice here. And I'll just go ahead and drop in some very simple notes here that will be contrasting a little bit. And if I were continuing to compose this as a real fugue after an episode, I would need another subject. It would be rare for me, for Bach, to have actually copied literally that same exact subject and dropped it in here. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now all I would need to do to compose the rest of this fugue is to continue to alternate episodes and subjects until the very end, and then write a nice ending piece. And in fact, I think that what I will do here is just go ahead and drop in a very, very brief ending here. So and of course I don't need the double bar at this point. That was just purely to show the end of the exposition. I will go ahead and drop in a double bar here, a final double bar, to show the end of the composition. And since I have finished composing the fugue, I will go ahead and erase all of the empty measures at the end. And let's listen to the entire fugue on the fly. Here we go. Voice 2, subject in the same key. Voice 3, subject in the same key. Episode. Back to another statement of the subject. And a ending. And this is once again a grossly oversimplified process of composing fugues, but this is exactly how you might do it. I should tell you that I very often have students compose fugues using food and rhythmic pattern. So for example, for the subject here, we might create a subject that goes something like this: pizza, pizza, I like pizza. And then we would have voice 1 sing it, and then voice 2 would sing pizza, pizza, I like pizza. Then we would have a third group sing pizza, pizza, I like pizza. And then we would need some counter subjects, so we might create one counter subject that would go, yes, yes, we like pizza. And then we might create another subject, that counter subject, so when we need two different counter subject that says something along the lines of, everybody loves it, let's get some pizza. Okay, and then we might need an episode that would go something like, strawberry shortcake, da 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 dum, and drop in an episode with some different food. And then we would go back to statements of the subject and different counter subjects combined and alternate those, and we could compose a nice little spoken fugue very quickly. A lot of fun to do. If we were in a real class together, I might ask us to do this together as a group activity. Okay, this seems simple here, the fugue on the fly, but once again, you apply those same processes, add in a little bit of musical genius, Johann Sebastian Bach, and you can come up with some wonderful, wonderful things. Understanding more about how music is assembled and put together gives you deeper insights into the music and a greater appreciation of some of the thoughts and levels of thoughts that these folks were doing. So, your assignment, compose a fugue. Let's go back to this fugue down here and have a look at it. Let's make it as simple as this one with a 2-measure subject. You can use that same subject in the same key. You can put it in 3 different voices. Let's make it a 3-voice fugue. You can use the counter subject that you've written here. Try to take a little bit more time and get it to sound good in the other voices, but you will need a third counter subject also, and you'll need an episode. Let's go ahead and compose something similar to this. And I would hesitate to say this, but I think I will just go ahead and say it. You'll need something like this at least once to have a development section, and you'll need an ending. So let's make all those parts of your fugue, and I look forward to hearing your projects. Please post them on the resource board. on the forum for the class. And please comment on every other person's fugue on the fly. All right. Thank you very much. May God richly bless you.